There are a number of different accounts regarding how Hamilton gained Washington's notice. William Johnson wrote that Nathanael Greene introduced Hamilton to the commander-in-chief. Robert Troup said that it was Henry Knox who recommended Hamilton to Washington. John C. Hamilton, citing Egbert Benson, said that Washington introduced himself to Hamilton at Harlem Heights. George Washington Parke Custis thought that Washington first noticed Hamilton at the Battle of Raritan at New Brunswick and had one of his aides invite the young artillery captain to headquarters. But the two men might have met before any of these encounters. Perhaps when Hamilton visited Elizabethtown back in 1773, or when Washington paraded into New York City on June 1775, or at the court-martial of soldiers in Hamilton's company. Or when Hamilton was drilling his men on the Common. Or when Hamilton was manning the cannons at Fort George and the Grand Battery. Or when Hamilton delivered information to Washington regarding Zedwitz's treasonous plot. Unfortunately, there is no definitive evidence as to when they first met. The great interest in the circumstances of the first meeting between Alexander Hamilton and George Washington shows the importance placed upon this event. For nearly 23 years, from the moment Hamilton joined Washington's staff in March 1777 until the day of Washington's death in December 1799, Hamilton and Washington would be one of the most effective teams in history. In war, in politics, the administration of government, finance, foreign affairs, in virtually everything they did as public figures. Hamilton was Washington's chief aide, and Washington was Hamilton's chief supporter. These two men, either separately or together, were involved in nearly every aspect of the nation's funding. The interest in the first meeting stems from the very fact that the history of Washington and Hamilton is, by and large, the history of the founding of the United States. If Washington did not yet know Hamilton, the commander-in-chief must have checked up on the young artillery captain before asking him to serve as his aide-de-camp. If Greene or Knox did not introduce Hamilton to Washington, the commander-in-chief must have asked them about the prospective aide, especially Knox, who was Hamilton's superior officer in the artillery. Knox and others must have given Hamilton glowing recommendations because Washington invited Hamilton into his military family. On March 1, 1777, George Washington announced in General Orders, Alexander Hamilton Esquire is appointed aide-de-camp to the commander-in-chief and is to be respected and obeyed as such. As commander-in-chief, George Washington had long complained about the amount of business he had to conduct in addition to fighting the war. To offload some of this work, Washington told former aide Joseph Reed that he needed men who can think for me as well as execute orders. In Hamilton, Washington found a man with boundless energy, the ability to both write and think for him, overflowing with military knowledge and political acumen, and who shared Washington's military and political ideologies. Washington had no other aide who could match Hamilton in all these departments.